Good morning. This is the appointed time. We have a quorum. No information paper has been issued since the last meeting. As for items for discussion at the next meeting, on the 5th of February, I had a meeting with the Labour and Welfare Bureau to work out the work plan for this panel in the Legislative Session 2025. You will find the items for discussion set out in the list. That's paper CB bracket 1160/2025 bracket 01. The next regular meeting is scheduled for the 17th of March. That's a Monday. We will discuss extension of the district services and community care teams scheme on supporting elderly and carers to 18 districts across the territory. We'll also discuss another item, and that's progress of the incentive scheme to encourage provision of residential care home for the elderly premises in new private developments. Any questions from members? If not, we then move on to the first discussion item today. That's the latest development of the dedicated fund, CB bracket 1160/2025 bracket 03, as well as paper number 04. We're joined by Undersecretary for Labour and Welfare today, Mr. Ho Kai Ming, and also a representative from LRT Consulting. I'm sorry, not for this item. Let's start with this item first. Members, if you want to speak, please press the request to speak button now. Undersecretary will have the floor. Chairman, this is the start of a new year, so I wish everybody smooth sailing and good health in the year of the snake. The Chief Executive announced in his policy address 2023 that to help NGOs meet their development needs, the government would set up a dedicated fund. In late 2023, the Social Welfare Department gathered views through different channels from the sector, and having considered the views, we decided to set up the dedicated fund. It was set up in May 2024 and briefed the Legislative Council. Now, the fund comprises the following categories: agency-based funding, mainland exchange, and national studies, as well as specified training. And they include staff funding, mainland exchange tours, national studies programs, and IT and non-IT training programs. As of the end of the year, the Social Welfare Department received 53 applications with a total funding amount of $34.8 million. 32 of them have been approved with a total commitment of about $11.8 million. 23 of them are related to information technology, as well as central procurement, human resources, online application system, as well as web enhancements, payment systems, security risk assessment, and audit. There are also 18 agency-based funding applications relating to staff training benefiting about 7,300 staff members. There are also specified training programs based on the subvented welfare services needs, and there are 7 such applications. The Social Welfare Department also encourages NGOs to take part in national studies in mainland exchange tours to enhance the understanding of the country. In order to facilitate this task, the SWD has commissioned the Connecting Hearts Limited to organize the thousands of Hong Kong social workers exploring the motherland series of exchange tours. And the first exchange tours took place in May, November, December 2024, visiting Chaozhou, Shaoguan, and Guangzhou. And we also received applications from the service units on organizing their own exchange activities. They're required to submit reports 3 months after the end of the 3 months after the fund has been approved, and meanwhile, evaluation report as well as interim reports are required to be submitted. We also check the implementation through checking the assessment and evaluation reports, and we conduct on-site inspections to ensure that the funds are properly used to meet the key performance indicators and the objectives of the fund. We welcome views from members. Thank you, Undersecretary. 10 members would like to speak. I will give each member some time. We have Lillian Kwok, Aman Yu, Benson Look, Chen Wing Kwong, Kenneth Leung, Teck Chi Yun, Chen Pui Leung, Lam So Wai, Doreen Kong, Deputy Chair, and Stanley Lee.
4分鐘連問連答啊！我哋
4 minutes questions and answers, please. Lillian Kwok. Thank you, Chair. Now, in terms of continuous professional development of social workers, I fully support the objective of the dedicated fund. I see that there are mainland exchange tours and national studies programs with a provision of $100 million. My question is this. I understand in November, December, about 1,000 participants have signed up for the mainland exchange tours. Have you assessed how many social workers will be able to go on these mainland exchange tours? Do you have KPIs? Roughly when the $100 million will be exhausted? What about new applicants? Do you impose any conditions or restrictions? Because these applicants will be able to form their own mainland exchange tours. And also about staff training under agency-based funding. You have IT as well as non-IT components. The provision is one of $300 million. What kind of training will be provided? As you see, from May, this fund has been in operation for 6 months. Have you sought any feedback from the social welfare sector in order to gauge its effectiveness? Thank you, Chair. I'll defer to Ms. Chan to take the question later on, but in terms of the number of participants, the $100 million can allow some 20,000 social workers to go on mainland exchange tours so as to learn more about the country and visit social welfare facilities. Now, on IT or information technology systems, if we leverage on IT, we'll be able to save manpower and enhance efficiency. Last year, we made a report to the Legislative Council. And as for briefing sessions for the sector, it took place in July. And as I understand, the sector has expressed interest in developing joint operating systems for use by the frontline staff. But as various frontline operations are involved, more time is needed for them to put their heads together so as to develop a joint system for common use by the frontline staff. So we will first collect feedback from them in considering how the operation of the dedicated fund should be improved. Commissioner Chan. Thank you. About the scope of funding in relation to the $300 million agency-based funding, our advice for the organizations is to consider their operational needs as well as the category of services they provide. So that means the training should be tailor-made for their staff. In order to enhance the management capacities of the organizations, to equip the staff with knowledge, to enhance the skills, etc. And that targeted training should be provided in such a manner. Well, let me supplement, Chairman. I'd like to have more information from the administration. For example, what kind of training courses have been in operation, you should have a list, because I've been told by the persons in charge of these organizations that for the middle rank or middle managers and those who are middle aged, they don't speak Putonghua, and it's difficult for them to go on mainland exchange tours. I want to know whether there are resources available to brush up their Putonghua or enhance their language proficiencies. If I may, Chairman, they are allowed to run language courses under the fund. Extra funding is available. Now, in 2025, for example, we have set 5 specific themes for the sector, and that additional resources can be provided. For example, training on identifying suspected child abuse cases and high-risk families, identification of those with mental health issues requiring professional intervention, as well as the use of IT to enhance support for carers, as well as enhancing the knowledge of staff in using IT and identifying suspected child abuse cases. Next, Mr. Aiman Yu. I want to know whether there are incentives for NGOs which have not yet applied for funding. For example, we're concerned about child abuse. Are there organizations under this portfolio which have yet to apply for funding? Will the government reach out to them? And will this become one of the KPIs in assessing the performance of the NGOs? Now, I understand that some 7,000 staff members have received the various trainings under the 3rd category. That's a specified training. Has the government conducted any assessment or evaluation? Can you share with us the feedback from the participants? Thank you, Chair. Now, for NGOs which do not apply for funding, they are still required to follow certain requirements. For example, they are required to undergo a 2-stage training. But if possible, resources should be provided for them to take part in enrichment courses. So on top of the 2-phase online course, they can also apply for resources to take enrichment courses to learn more about the policy changes. As for KPIs for NGOs, we have agreements with the NGOs. We don't impose additional conditions in these agreements, but we do encourage them to apply for funding to provide training so that they'll be in a better position to meet the service quality standards. I will now give the floor to Assistant Commissioner to take the other question. As the Undersecretary mentioned, some training courses have benefited 7,300 staff members. These training courses relate to management capacities, crisis management, and building high-performance teams, as well as professional knowledge and skills, such as therapeutic treatment approaches or skills in handling emotional elderly service users, as well as workplace management. Now, some staff members may need to enhance their Putonghua proficiency because they work in the front line and they are in touch with Putonghua speakers all the time. And we have courses available. In fact, in the end of last year, some courses have commenced, and in fact there are more courses to be rolled out in the beginning of this year or in March and April. We don't have details of each and every program. We do require that specific assessments be conducted on these programs to see if the objectives are met and whether the participating staff could benefit from these training programs.
做一啲員工嘅
Chairman, if questionnaires were distributed, please let us know about the feedback from the respondents so that we know if the fund is being used well. Chairman, we have not carried out any questionnaire survey, but we require the subvented NGOs to submit a report in 3 months' time after the fund has been dispersed. We'll submit our analysis of the report to the LegCo. Next, Mr. Benson-Look. Thank you, Chairman. This dedicated fund was rolled out in May 2024. One of the restrictions is that the ceiling is capped at 1% of the NGO's provisional subventions in 2024-25 or $500,000, whichever is higher. As I said previously, we cut 1% of funding across the board in the social welfare sector because of the government's tight fiscal budget. Given this funding of 1% under the dedicated fund, it seems that NGOs are able to train their staff with the extra resources allocated. But according to paragraph 6, it is mentioned that as at end January 2025, the department has received applications for a total of 53 projects, and the total amount of funding requested was approximately $34.8 million. But we have 179 subvented NGOs. The percentage of application is some 30%. Given the $500 million of this dedicated fund, $34.8 million amount to only 7 to 8% of the fund. So it seems that not a lot of NGOs have applied for the fund. Is there ways for us to encourage more subvented NGOs to make use of these resources to enhance training for their staff? This fund was rolled out in the mid-2024, and usually the subvented NGOs plans for their year at the beginning of 2024. And I wonder if the administration have any estimates on the number of applications that you're going to receive in 2025. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Look, for the question. The cut on funding allocated to the Social Welfare Department has nothing to do with this dedicated fund. We focus on subvented organizations with subsidy of over $50 million. For smaller NGOs, they don't have to cut their expenditure by 1%. Last May, we came to the LegCo, and in July last year, we briefed the NGOs on the dedicated fund, and on the 8th of November 2024, we started accepting applications from the NGOs. So only a few months have passed. For mainland exchange and national studies, we only provided the NGOs with a template in December 2024. So we expect that in the coming few months, there will be more NGOs applying for the funding. For the $500 million funding under dedicated fund, it should last for 5 years. I'll see if Ms. Chan has anything to add. Assistant Director, I have nothing to add. Mr. Chairman Kong. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to follow up on the progress of the dedicated fund. First of all, I think that is more important that the users think that the fund is useful. The administration said that they have received 53 applications and 32 of them have been approved. So I have a question for the administration. What do the NGOs and staff think about the application procedures and the content of the training? Is the fund being used well among the NGOs? Have you conducted any survey to look into whether any adjustments should be made? Second, I see that you have set aside $100 million on mainland exchange and national studies. I don't object to such an arrangement. I think that we should let NGO and their staff know about the national affairs better, but I think that the provision is too much. For Chinese Medicine Development Fund amounts to about $500 million, but under the fund we haven't set aside $100 million for exchange on the mainland. After going on these mainland exchange and tours, is there any indicators for us to look into the effectiveness of such tours? Is there ways for us to know how much better the NGO staff understand the mainland after going on these tours? I think that we have to set the objectives of these exchange tours well. Thank you. Undersecretary. As mentioned, we have received some applications, but not a lot of mainland exchange tours have been conducted on top of apart from the thousands of Hong Kong social workers exploring the motherland. 3 exchange tours took place under the relevant program, and I was a part of one of it. Some NGO staff hadn't gone to the mainland for quite some time. Some of them, even if they've been to the mainland, they didn't go for the sake of visiting residential care homes for the elderly on the mainland. The service quality of the RCHEs in Hong Kong is not bad, but the mainland uses more technology to monitor the conditions of the elderly. And that was beyond my expectation because they place fiber cable under the bed of the elderly to monitor the conditions of the elderly residents of the RCHEs. In Hong Kong, we do adopt technology, but not to that extent. So I think that the 3 tours did inspire the NGO staff, and I think that they are very useful. With more mainland exchange tours in the future, I believe that we can improve our services. And I think that information transparency can also be enhanced. Chairman, I fully support the $100 million provision, but I'm more concerned about the effectiveness of these tours because we are concerned about whether the social workers are patriotic enough. I will ask the Assistant Director to supplement. Thank you, Chairman. I thank the member for the question. After the NGO staff have gone onto the mainland, we look into whether they have enhanced their understanding of the mainland, and we encourage the exchange between those who have gone on the mainland exchange tours and those who have not. And after going on the tours, they have to submit a report to let us know about their views about the tours and their feedback. Overall speaking, most of them think that the exchange tours broaden their horizon and They think that the tours have given them opportunities to exchange and talk to social welfare organizations and people living on the mainland so that they can learn from them. After the NGO staff have come back to Hong Kong, we encourage them to share their experience with their fellows. We invited the Connecting Hearts Limited to organize the 3 exchange tours, and after the exchange tours, we organized sharing session. And in February 2025, we're going to host another sharing session to allow participants to share their experience and insights from the exchange tours. So that more practitioners in the social welfare sector will benefit. Next, Mr. Kenneth Leung. Thank you, Chairman. I have a technical question. On paragraph 6, it is said that the SWD received a total of 53 applications, but according to paragraph 7 and 8, on staff training, 18 applications were received, system enhancement, 23 applications. For 53 applications, are we talking about the total number of applications? And I see that there is another 2 applications for mainland exchange tours. So altogether, 40-something applications been set out in the paper. For the remaining applications, what kind of projects are we talking about here? For mainland exchange tours set out in paragraph 11 in December 2024. After consolidating Connecting Hearts experiences in organizing mainland exchange tours, the administration provided protocol and a sample itinerary for NGOs' reference. How flexible is it for the NGOs to organize their mainland exchange tours? Is there any restrictions on the content or the length of the tours? Now on system enhancement. Sometimes system maintenance and hardware maintenance may be required for system development, and sometimes the cost is not incurred upon the purchase of the system. How are we going to subsidize them in these areas? Thank you. I'll ask the Assistant Director to supplement, but before that, well, actually, apart from the 3 types of projects, we have received 3 applications for national studies and 7 on specified training, such as training on the mandatory reporting of child abuse. Some of them have not been approved because we need to look into the details of IT project applications. In time, we'll be able to approve more applications. As for the rest of the questions, Assistant Director, please. Thank you, Chairman. On the question about mainland exchange tours, about the mainland exchange tours that are organized by NGOs that are not Connecting Hearts. We encourage NGOs to organize mainland exchange tours on their own. Of course, they can make reference to the itinerary of the Connecting Hearts, but they can also tailor their tours according to the needs of their staff. But they must comply with our requirements. And the NGOs are aware of such requirements on, say, the length of the tours, the content. Say, for example, in the 3-day tours, they have to visit 6 social welfare facilities or organizations. They should also have direct exchange with social welfare practitioners in the governmental entities on the mainland.
IT 系統自動撥款嗰個問題。
What about long-term funding for IT systems? I'll see if the Assistant Commissioner has anything to supplement. These are subvented organizations under the lump sum grant system, so they are given their LSG to support their own planning. I'll see if the Assistant Commissioner has anything to add to that. For agency-based funding, after funding has been approved on the basis of the provisional subventions, the organizations are free to make use of the funds in a 5-year period in a flexible manner. That means staff training as well as system upgrade. So the funds are valid for 5 years. And we've set the cap either 100% or 1% of the provisional subventions or $500,000, whichever is higher. Next, Dr. Tishayun. Thank you, Chair. I support the dedicated fund. Despite the fiscal position, Secretary has been able to provide us with funding support. Like Mr. Benson Look said, we have experienced a 2% cut already. I hope that the Financial Secretary will not go further this year because we're pared to the bone. Now, about the 53 projects, 23 of them relate to IT project applications. So they'd like to capitalize on information technology. But as I understand, the projects primarily include service user and human resources information management systems, central procurement, online registration and payment systems, etc., as well as website enhancements. I do feel that these are rather general. And as I understand, the government has been dispersing funds for organizations to undertake these tasks. And after years of efforts, they only provide basic services. They're not even using AI. I think there is an expectation gap here. They're supposed to enhance their systems years ago, and now they're applying for funding to do the same thing all over again. My next question is that smaller organizations may not have sufficient talents to support long-term development. Apart from funding support, does the government have any measure to help organizations better leverage on technology? So my question is, apart from funding support, whether there are other longer-term support or continuous support for the organizations. And also, can you tell me among the 23 IT project applications, how many have been approved, totaling how much? I'll take the latter question first. Out of the 23 applications, we have approved 4 because, as I just explained, we have just received some of these applications and it takes time to vet them. About the use of AI, like the member said, it's not really something new when it comes to development of mobile apps because they fall under the scope as mentioned. These apps will be used by members of the public in making registration or lodging applications. Now, as for systems upgrade, it involves the frontline work, and they can apply for funding, and if it's possible, they can make joint applications with other service units, but that may entail more complex procedures, and that is why we have additional administrative funding available for them. As for high-end technology, we also have the Gerentech Fund. We have a total commitment of $1 billion, and so far $700 million have been used. Let's say if they want to procure something really expensive, they can make use of this I&T fund for better living. As for system development, they can make use of the dedicated fund. A follow-up question, Chairman. Now, of course, it doesn't just concern the social welfare sector. Other sectors need to leverage on technology as well. But my question is whether there are other forms of support for the development of I&T in the sector. As I mentioned, this I&T fund for sharing technology provides a lot of funding for the NGOs to make procurements. I'll see if the Commissioner has anything to add. Now, my answer is that the government encourages better use of I&T by social welfare units. We've also developed various systems for use by the service units, such as one for elderly voucher schemes, as well as an online platform for RCGEs and PWDs, as well as a service performance management information system. The objective is to promote a wider adoption of I&T. And we'd like to encourage the sector to embrace technology. Next, Mr. Chen Pui Leung. Now, as the administration just explained, upon successful application, the fund disbursed could be good in a 5-year period. I want to know whether there be any time limit. That is, an application should be made within 3 years, or no application will be considered afterwards. So, will the government encourage NGOs to apply for funding as quickly as possible to roll out system upgrades or to provide training earlier? The other point is about agency-based training. It covers staff training and system enhancement. Do you set aside any proportion for either? Because let's say if the majority of the provision goes to system enhancement, then will there be less resources for staff training? Last question. That's on quality of training programs. I see that there are different training courses for staff, seminars, etc., and workshops. What about quality assurance? Is there any accreditation mechanism? Will you consider accrediting the courses, and that participants will be able to get a certificate upon completion of the courses and passing an exam, for example? This can help them in terms of promotion opportunities, and this may be a greater incentive for the staff. I'll take the first question and then I'll give the floor to the Commissioner. I think that the welfare sector is not the same as, say, the financial sector. We run a lot of courses. We also invite professors and veterans to share their work experience. And it's very difficult to set a template, so to speak, and repeat these courses for other NGOs. I understand that, say, for the insurance sector, there may be standard courses. That may award the certificates and diplomas, but that's not the case for the welfare sector. However, we note the members' view. We see whether it's possible to include the certificate-bearing courses. Assistant Commissioner. The question was whether the organization would deploy all the funds to system enhancement and leave no money for exchange or training. Now, this comes under the system enhancement portion. As for mainland exchange tours, that comes under another funding category. No, I'm suggesting even under agency-based funding, there are two different scopes: staff training and system enhancement. I just want to know whether the funding proportion would be skewed. Thank you for the clarification. Indeed, under agency-based funding, the same provision is given for staff training as well as system enhancement. But as I mentioned, we have an addition of $100 million for national studies and another $100 million for specified training. That means there are other training opportunities for the staff. I'd like to go back to another point about the application time frame. We want to give more time to organizations to draw up plans based on their needs to ensure proper use of funds. So we have a rather broad time frame for application. That's a period of 4 years. The fund is valid for 5 years, and we do not limit the rounds of applications. Apart from the specified training category, every year we roll out a new theme. So apart from the specified training for the remaining funding categories, they can apply within the 4-year period. Ms. Connie Lam. Today's topic is a dedicated fund of $500 million, and during the Chinese New Year, I exchanged views with the senior management of the NGOs on the dedicated fund. For agency-based funding, the provision is one of $300 million. In the past, the government provided resources for organizations to implement system upgrade, but I've been told, and I also have experience in working for an NGO, that when it comes to small to medium-sized NGOs, the IT systems tend to be quite backward, and that the $300 million agency-based funding may not be sufficient in upgrading the systems because the fund will also be used on staff training. What else can be done to help them catch up with the latest technology? Some of these organizations even give out handwritten invoices. And I'd like to refer to the paper. 53 applications have been received so far. 23 of them have been approved with a funding amount of $11.8 million. I'd like to know the reason why other applications have been turned down. The third question is about national studies. As I said before, some social workers do not have a good understanding of our country. So having visited places such as Chaochao, Shaoguan, and Guangzhou, have they learned anything about, say, the development of social welfare in these places or rural poverty alleviation? Because these are rather vague topics. Can you tell us how exactly these participants are able to apply what they've learned here, and also how much have been spent?
Undersecretary, thank you. The ceiling of 1% or $500,000 is not a lot. We understand that. That's why we said that we encourage several smaller NGOs to develop systems jointly. For elderly neighborhood district centers, They are smaller, so we encourage these centers of different districts to develop a single system together. Say, for example, if 6 centers jointly develop a system, then they can leverage on $500,000 times 6. That is $3 million to develop a system. And we think that that's more cost effective. Larger NGOs have advantage, but smaller NGOs can also work together to develop a system. There could be challenges because different neighborhood centers may operate differently, and they would need time to come up with an agreed system. For the projects that have not been approved, they are mostly IT projects. As I mentioned, we have just received these applications and approval takes time. When we come back to the electrical next time, we'll have more projects approved and we'll be able to let you know more details. I'll ask the Assistant Director to supplement. Thank you, Chairman. On the cost per person on the mainland exchange tours, the subsidy amount to $3,500 to $4,000. As the member have said, well, they ask what the NGO staff who have gone on to mainland exchange tours have learned. Well, they actually gave us positive feedback. Participants of these mainland exchange tours were able to see how technology was being used on the mainland. And they were impressed. They told us that they want to bring such technology to Hong Kong and implement it here. Another thing that they observe is that the service offered by ICHEs on the mainland is very flexible. And they told us that they want to bring such flexibility back to Hong Kong. Thank you. Next, Ms. Doreen Kong, Deputy Chair. Thank you, Chairman. I have a few questions. First, I'd like to know why some projects are still not approved. I know that the application period has just started. But for projects that have not been approved, what are the reasons? Seems that the approval rate is rather low. Does it mean that the NGOs don't really understand the application procedures? Or is it that the application procedures is too complicated? Will you step up publicity and promotion and target smaller NGOs? Second, at this panel on welfare services or through other channels, is there ways for us to be informed of the funding approved to NGOs under this fund? Because members of the public have been asking for transparency. Are we going to have more information on the projects approved? Also, how many projects approved are from smaller NGOs? Do they experience difficulty in preparing application documents? On assessment of the effectiveness of the dedicated fund, I think that's very important, especially for the $300 million provision on agency-based training. The administration said that the participants have positive feedback. Apart from collecting feedback from participants, how are you going to assess the effectiveness of the fund? Because that may not be objective enough. Because I've looked at the forms of your assessment for the respondents, there are only 3 questions. There are only a few boxes as to how, say, for example, to the question of how effective the course is. there's a box on very effective, so on and so forth. For the question that allows comments, you restrict the word limit to 200. Are you trying to encourage feedback or are you not? Can you be less mechanic or rigid in this area? Thank you. Undersecretary. We have not rejected any projects. For the projects that have not been processed, they are IT projects, and it takes time for us to approve or scrutinize these applications. Management of NGOs may have different views. Some of them want to take up less responsibilities. But actually tomorrow, I'm going to meet with the management of various NGOs to brief them on the dedicated fund along with other schemes that we have to offer. We will let the members of the public know how many projects we have approved and the funding amount. Say after one financial year, we will consolidate all the information and report to the Legislative Council. As for assessment of effectiveness, but we don't just rely on the forms returned by participants. When the NGOs submit their applications, we ask them what their objectives are and how we should assess their effectiveness. And it's not just about written reports. We may meet with them. And in 3 months' time, upon completion of the training, the NGOs need to submit to us a report. So we don't just rely on questionnaires. Of course, it's easier for us to quantify KPIs, but we use OKR these days, and we think that's more effective. Thank you. Chairman, the assessment form actually exists on your website. Perhaps you should fine-tune the content of the form. Next, Mr. Stanley Lee. Thank you, Chairman. I thank the administration for coming here to brief us on the latest progress of the dedicated fund. As I mentioned, this dedicated fund will be very effective in enhancing the service quality of the frontline officers in the social welfare sector. But a few questions. This dedicated fund is for subvented NGOs, but there are self-financed, non-subvented, non-government organizations on the market. If there is residue or remaining balance under the dedicated fund, will these organizations be subvented or subsidized as well? One of the categories under the fund is agency-based funding. It could include system enhancement, IT projects, and non-IT projects. Given our tight fiscal budget, is it possible for us to expand the scope of funding? We've seen child abuse cases in some social welfare facilities, such as halfway homes. Is it possible for us to install CCTV with artificial intelligence functions so that these halfway homes can apply for subsidy to enhance their systems? Is there any guidelines for the NGOs as to what kind of IT projects will be allowed? The Undersecretary gave us some examples. Say, for example, beds that monitor the heartbeat of the residents. If the administration can provide the NGOs with some examples of projects, then that would help them, I think. On the funding category on mainland exchange and national studies, you said that you have received 3 applications. How do we encourage NGO to apply for funding for mainland exchange and national studies? Can we link that with the agency-based funding? Say for NGOs that want to apply for funding for staff training, they must also apply for funding for mainland exchange and national studies. Because NGO staff must be aware of what's happening on the mainland. And we are encouraging cross-boundary aging. Now, I see that you ask the NGOs to visit RCHEs when they go on the mainland exchange tours. I think that perhaps sometimes NGO staff is not aware of how, say, for example, people can reimburse medical fees that they've incurred on the mainland in Hong Kong. Undersecretary, for non-subvented NGOs, given our tight budget, we encourage them to organize these activities, but we have to see if we have any extra resources for them. Assistant Director, thank you. On system enhancement, if NGOs want to upgrade their existing system, they can apply for the dedicated fund. We also encourage it. NGOs don't have to develop a brand new system. If they want to upgrade it, they can apply for the fund. For NGOs that have applied for agency-based funding, we encourage them to also apply for funding under the other 2 categories, including the mainland exchange and national studies and specified training. We encourage NGOs to apply funding of all categories. I have a quick follow-up question. Because I see that there are only 3 applications for the mainland exchange and national studies involving only 260 staff members. The point is how we can encourage NGOs to apply for funding for mainland exchange and national studies. I believe that there are more NGOs applying for agency-based funding. Perhaps you should encourage those NGOs to also apply for funding under mainland exchange and national studies. I think that NGO staff should know about the facilities on the mainland, and I think that the government should also consider covering non-subvented NGOs under the dedicated fund. We hear the member. Thank you. Next, Mr. Andrew Lam. As a part the establishment of the dedicated fund, in recent years, I've been looking into the use of various funds under the government. Very often, a fund is established to meet certain demand on the city. In 1967, there is a training fund under the Social Welfare Fund. It's still in operation, and there's some $20 million of balance that cover mainland exchange tours and talks. I hope that the information that I have is wrong. My question is very simple. I think that sometimes there's duplications among different funds. I talked about 1961. Perhaps some of the members have not been born yet. Say, for example, Dr. Teck Chi Yun. Please look into other government funds. Given our tight resources, please see if there is any similar funds already available under the government. We want to see the best use of our resources. That's why I give you this example. Please review if there is any duplications among different funds in the government.
局長。
Undersecretary, Assistant Commissioner can supplement, please. Thank you. Thank you. The member's comment is noted. You mentioned the Social Work Training Fund. Indeed, the fund is available for welfare organizations. I thank member for his comments. Indeed, we do not want overlapping of the two funds in terms of scope and beneficiaries. So the dedicated fund provides funding only to NGOs providing subvented welfare services. So for organizations applying for funding for training in the same category, they are not included. Well, it's good to know that there is clarity on how duplication is to be handled. But I think as far as the sector is concerned, the line is not clearly drawn. Well, I think the crux of the member's comment is that you should provide greater clarity and address the issue of possible overlapping. Next, Ms. Judy Chen. Thank you, Chairman. I welcome the setting up of the dedicated fund. This is definitely an effective tool for the welfare sector. Now, I'm concerned about the dollar sign. It's a $500 million fund, $300 million of which will be spent on staff training and system enhancement. Now, my concern is this. And I actually agree with Dr. Teck Chi Yun that when it comes to system enhancements, I have read that they are all something really common, such as central procurement, human resources management, online registration and payment systems, web enhancements, etc. Now, if the system development takes place in Hong Kong, inevitably the cost would be jacked up. Now, we also have another funding category that is $100 million for mainland exchange tours and national studies, as well as another $100 million for specified training. Then frontline staffers are already given the opportunity to see for themselves the merits of the mainland systems. And is it possible, therefore, for them to facilitate the introduction of the systems into Hong Kong? Thank you, Chair. Well, of course, subject to certain conditions, they can also procure the systems directly from the mainland. But I understand that there are hiccups. It would be all right if they have service available in the mainland, but otherwise, you'll need to design a new system for service maintained in Hong Kong. And there may be additional costs in adapting the mainland system for use in Hong Kong. We do not disallow their application, but it depends on whether the system is best suited for the services in Hong Kong. Say in the mainland, there may be a system for an elderly service user to get a meal. And I think it's more important, instead of dwelling into the nitty-gritty, to focus on the real issues. About localizing the systems, as you mentioned, when it comes to technology, in Hong Kong, the hot button issue is privacy. Now, in the mainland, they enjoy the advantage of having big data platforms. For our sector, likewise, we need big data analytics in order to provide services with any precision. But the privacy issue always gets in the way. So apart from national studies that is focusing on patriotic education, I hope that there will be more opportunities for our practitioners to learn more about the big data platforms, so that if they find it acceptable, the service can also be introduced into Hong Kong as well. Right, thank you, Ms. Chan. I can provide that in the template itinerary in future. Mr. Stanning. I support the establishment of the fund. I have a question on $100 million set aside for mainland exchange tours and national studies. My question is on how applications are vetted. I understand that according to information, applications have been approved, totaling dozens of millions. So my question is on how the applications are approved and what is regarded as a reasonable amount. We ran 3 exchange tours to Guangzhou, Shaoquan, and Chaozhou. From these 3 itineraries, we learned that the cost, including transportation, tickets to attractions, etc., should be around 3,500 to 4,000 per person. And we devised templates for use by the organizations, but of course this is only for their reference. They can devise their own itineraries. They may wish to pay visits to welfare facilities that are more suited to their service model. But that's roughly the reference for them. Then will the administration consider providing clear guidelines? What is the objective of the exchange tours? You're spending $100 million on them. Will you provide some clear guidelines on the objectives? Now you have had a number of exchange tours. Can you tell us whether an assessment has been done as to whether they're effective? National studies seek to allow participants a better understanding of their countries. So in the application, the applicant is required to explain the purpose of the visit and expected outcome. 3 months after the visit, they are also required to submit a report on evaluation of the outcome. And of course, what the member mentioned will also be included in the report. All right, let's move on to the next item now. Oh, not yet. Please wait. We will be moving on to the next one, but do wait a bit. If you're not waiting to speak for this item again, hold your fire. The next item is findings and recommendations of the review of manpower for healthcare services in residential care homes. Paper number CB-1-160/2025-06 and 05. Let's invite the administration to come in, as well as the representative of the consultant LLT, that is. If you have something to say, please press the button now. Under Secretary, could you please walk us through the paper? Yes, would like to brief members on the key findings of recommendations of the report on consultancy study on the skill and qualification requirements of RCH staff providing health and rehab services in Hong Kong. In order to implement the measures announced in Policy Address 2022, in July 2023, the Social Welfare Department commissioned a consultant to conduct a study, and the Steering Committee on Review of Manpower for Healthcare Services in RCH was established to offer advice on the study. The committee was chaired by Dr. Lam Ching Choi, and it comprised stakeholders from various sectors, including operators, allied health professionals, trade union members. The study was completed in the end of 2024. The consultancy study collected different views. They also conducted observation through fieldwork visits, and they contacted more than 340 stakeholders. They also dished out questionnaires to collect feedback from different stakeholders. They also consulted different committees. There are four major findings. The first one is the establishment of a new rank as health and care practitioner. Now, against the backdrop of an aging population, there is a greater need to step up healthcare in residential care homes. This new rank, called the HCP, Health and Care Practitioner, will help cover care and health duties with due emphasis on practice. This can build a good career ladder to attract new blood. It can also help retain manpower. There will also be a career pathway for health workers or care workers to become health workers in order to alleviate the manpower shortage in the sector. There will also be healthcare practitioners panel responsible for registration, assessment, and complaint. At the initial stage, we will invite serving registered health workers who have served for not less than 3 years to undergo training. And they will also be required to complete a training course pitched at QF Level 4. This is in line with the entry qualification requirements for enrolled nurses. As for subvented welfare services, the duties for the HCPs will be similar to those of ENs. The second measure is for care workers to take training courses. Now, after completing this certificate training course, the care workers can be promoted to health workers. As the care workers' duties focus on practice, we recommend reducing the number of learning hours in language subjects with a corresponding increase in training hours on vocational-related knowledge so that care workers can be equipped with more practical experience and operational competencies. The third recommendation is to amend the R6G regulation and R6D regulation so as to introduce the new HCP rank into the relevant regulations without altering the statutory staffing requirements. The fourth recommendation is on staff recruitment and retention. There should be more career development and promotion opportunities so as to attract and retain staff. The SWD has accepted the report of the consultancy study, and we welcome views from members. 9 members will be speaking in this order: Benson Look, Andrew Lam, Stanley Ng, Teck Chi Yun, Yan Man Yu, Doreen Kong, Michael Tian, Tommy Zhang, and myself. Mr. Benson Look will kick off. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to speak on the review of manpower for healthcare services. The consultancy study covered the questionnaire, survey, and collection of feedback from stakeholders. Now, one major recommendation is the establishment of a new care professional rank called Health and Care Practitioner. Now the paper seems rather economical, so I checked the consultancy studies full report itself, and I have a number of questions for clarification. About potential training organizations for the rank health and care practitioner, according to the report, only institutions approved by the HACAAVQ can provide the relevant training for HCP. There should also be relevant professionals arranged as trainers, such as social or community nurses, pharmacists, and PTs. So my question is, how many such institutions are within the scope of eligible training institutions? The second question is this. This is a training course spanning 760 hours, and that's about 60 to 100,000 Hong Kong dollars. I want to know whether it's covered by the CEF. The third question is, again, related to the consultancy study. It's recommended the HCP provides care-related services such as the use of urinary catheters, intramuscular injections, etc. But I think to a certain extent these are invasive medical procedures. The Social Welfare Department is the body responsible for registration and regulation. Since medical procedures are involved, I wonder if the Social Welfare Department is best placed to be the regulatory body, or whether professionals from the healthcare sector should be involved.
Under Secretary, I'll ask Ms. Kwan to take the question. Thank you. Thank you for your question and concern. We also attach a lot of importance to the service quality of the HCP. In terms of regulation, under our licensing office, we have a health superintendents, we have nurse officers, senior nurse officers, registered nurse under the office. They have medical background and rich experience to carry out the regulatory work. We will step up surprise inspections on staff offering care and health duties in care homes and social welfare facilities. When there's complaint, we'll follow up on them. And we will monitor the service quality and performance strictly. I'll ask the consultant to take the other question. Thank you, Chairman. On the point about potential organizations, most of the institutes in Hong Kong are qualified to offer such courses because they have a self-assessment mechanism. No less than 3 institutions can offer such courses. For those that are not on the list, they can be qualified after they have passed the assessment. For institutions without self-assessment mechanism, after being assessed by us, they can be qualified to offer courses as well. On the question about QEF, we'll talk to the UGC after the meeting. Thank you. For the proposed potential organizations, they are existing academic institutions. Is that right? Thank you, Chairman. Apart from institutions that are already offering similar courses, those that are interested and qualified with the appropriate teaching staff, they can organize these courses as well. Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you. For health workers and registered, or rather enrolled nurse, there are some duplications of duties that amount to 3/4 of their workload. And the qualifications or eligibility criteria are similar. Most of the practitioners prefer to be registered as enrolled nurses. Is remuneration the core problem for why people don't opt for care workers? If that is the problem, how are we going to deal with that? Undersecretary. Enrolled nurse is attractive because they can be promoted to a higher rank. Now, in the future, we will create a new rank of HCP. Because of the higher requirements, the salary would definitely be higher for HCP. We hope to retain care workers in the social welfare sector as HCP. And we'll also create a registration mechanism for home managers so that after being promoted to health workers from care workers, they can become HCPs and stay in the social welfare sector instead of going for the medical sector. With a higher academic requirements, of course, the salary for HCP would be higher. Currently, the salary for RN and EN is higher. That's why these positions are more attractive. But with the HCP position created, it will make the social welfare sector more attractive. Thank you. For one of these two pathways, it has a more attractive career progression path, a higher remuneration package. How can we allow the social welfare sector to retain talents with the HCP position or rank? Next, Mr. Stanley Ng. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to seek clarification from the Undersecretary. What is the policy objective of establishing the HCP professional rank? What goal are you trying to achieve? If you establish this rank just to improve the career progression pathways for care workers, retain talents, that's not enough. We have been in touch with elderly residents and RCHEs. We have one observation. We need to make sure that they're well taken care of in the care homes. I think that this should be our goal. I wonder if this goal is shared by the department. We cannot just fix the problem when it arises. Say, for elderly in RCHEs that cannot take care of themselves, their lives are very challenging, regardless of whether there is a HCP rank. even with the HCP rank, it doesn't mean that their lives can be improved. Will this HCP professional rank be able to attract more people to join the profession so that they can be promoted from health workers to HCP? I don't think that your objectives can be met just by establishing a professional rank. Undersecretary. Deputy Secretary, please. Thank you. I thank Mr. Ng's first question. Let me talk about the policy objective of establishing a new professional rank. One of the problems that the sector is facing is that there is no career progression pathways for health workers, and it makes it difficult for care homes to attract new blood. With the aging population, there is a higher demand from the elderly for care and health services. However, at the same time, we're faced with a manpower crunch, especially professional care and health workers. We have been nurturing enrolled nurses every year. We have saved some 400 graduates in 10 years' time. We'll have 3,000 more enrolled nurses. But at the same time, there is great demand for EN and RN. EN doesn't only work for the social welfare sector, but also the medical sector. Most of the ENs, after they graduate, would go for RNs, and they will opt for the medical sector instead of the social welfare sector. We need to think about how we can nurture dedicated talents for the social welfare sector, and this professional rank is something that we've been advocating for some 10 years. On the level of health workers, we want to offer them a promotion letter so that they can have a better career prospect. At the level of care homes and the operators, now we're offering them flexibility in the use of manpower. When care homes comply with the statutory requirements, they can hire HCP instead of enrolled nurses, and that allow them to more flexibly use their manpower. Third, on the level of the trade, by having this new professional rank, we hope to attract new blood into the industry. Fourth, on the level of the society, with dedicated professionals for the social welfare sector, hopefully we will no longer need to compete with the medical sector on health and care practitioners. On the training, the courses, and the qualification requirements, they are identical to those of the enrolled nurses. We'll make sure that the HCP will be competent to perform the care duties in the future so that their skills are comparable to that of the enrolled nurses. Is the HCP a promotional rank? The consultant recommended in the report that at the initial stage of establishing this HCP professional rank, we should invite health workers who have worked in the sector for 3 years to undergo training first, because these health workers have experience working in care homes. They are more informed of its operation, And we believe that these workers will be able to develop relevant skills quicker before becoming a HCP.
大家知道啦，社福界請
Dr. Dick Chi-yun. It's a painful experience in terms of recruitment of health workers in the social welfare sector. You have the labor importation scheme, but it's just a short-term fix. Now, on recruitment of nurses, I've been told that they're not expected to do any actual work. They are there just to fill head counts. So it's been a very painful experience for our sector in years. Now, I understand that the only recommendation is to create a new professional rank called health and care practitioner, and that after studying for 3 years, care workers can become health workers. I don't see a really mature ladder. You need to put in place a holistic reform to attract and retain manpower. For example, will our young people start with the post of a care worker before moving on? I don't think that's the case. Now, if you want to attract young people, you should bear in mind that young people would rather directly enroll in a nursing course and become a nurse rather than becoming a health worker and the health and care practitioner. So I don't think it gives very good prospect for those who are still undergrads. So the only upward ladder is for health workers, incumbent health workers. Now the second question is, after I received training as a health and care practitioner, then I may still be snapped up by the private sector because 90% of the job is the same as a nurse. So there will still be a brain drain in welfare sector. They will still move to the medical sector. So my first question is, how would you turn this rank into a professional rank to avoid the brain drain? And the second question is, we are not only just short of nurses, we're short of therapists and other allied health professionals. So do you have a comprehensive plan to groom talents apart from resorting to labor importation? Thank you, Chair. Now, for health and care practitioner, we will amend the regulations, as I said in my opening remarks, so that care home operators can have an additional choice whether to recruit a nurse or enrolled nurse or an HCP. Of course, we won't spell out in the law what the pay should be, but since we have a prevailing shortage, we do expect that the pay for HPCs will be higher than health workers in general because they have different duties. They also have different job duties than those of enrolled nurses. Now, to answer the member's question on attracting manpower, of course, some may take nursing courses and in the end of the day they may wish to work in hospitals, and that's their personal choice. We provide young people with an additional choice, and that is they can start with being health workers and they can then progress to health and care practitioners, and that's another rung in the career ladder. Now, the suggestion that this is not a good prospect for our young people, I'm afraid I cannot agree with that. Against the backdrop of an aging population in Hong Kong, inevitably, for some job types such as care workers, we need to import labor to meet the demand. As for more senior positions and managerial roles, we hope to attract more local young people to join the sector. Chairman, I don't think my questions have been answered. Let me repeat. How do you stop health and care practitioners from leaving the sector because the other sector may offer a higher pay? For the BCW, health workers, other therapists, etc., are these outside the scope of your study? Is the study only about care workers? Why don't you wait for another round? Next Deputy Chair, Ms. Doreen Kong. Chairman, I want to share my observations. This report is quite thick. It's 200-page long. But apart from reflecting the reality, I am concerned as to whether this report could truly provide solutions to problems. About the manpower crunch, it doesn't happen to residential care homes only. That's a prevailing situation for the healthcare as well as welfare sector. This is the panel on welfare services, and I don't think we are discussing the full picture. I agree with what Dr. Teacher Yun and Stanley Ng said. I have the same doubt. Is it really the solution to the manpower crunch just by establishing a new rank? Well, I think that this could be a quick fix to the statutory staffing requirements for residential care homes in the short term, but it's not a long-term solution. Page 91 of the report refers to the potential demand in the coming 5 years. According to this manpower demand projection, in the coming 5 years, in terms of the demand for health and care practitioners, only 220 HCPs are needed in the coming 5 years. It's really astonishing after reading this 200-page long report. Why going through all the fuss? If we're facing competition from other places as well, why are you making such a conservative projection as you're only having demand for 220 HCPs? Now, Dr. Tikshin also asked this question, and that is, you cannot stop the brain drain despite providing training to the practitioners. There may be competition from other places. So have you taken this into account in your manpower demand projection? I'd like to turn to another point. Now, I'm not going to say no to this paper. Let me just reassure you at the outset. But we should consider the situation comprehensively, and that is there anything about the pay scale of the HCPs, the health workers, care workers, even enrolled nurses? Today, you tell me that this new rank will be put in place to complete the career progression path. But what is the pay scale? And then paragraph 115, page 115 of the report refers to the division of work between the HCP and nurses. I don't see any difference at all, apart from the entry qualification requirement. In terms of the actual job duties involved, the HCP seems to have a more onerous list of duties than nurses. So it's a tough job for them. Can you explain the difference? My last question is this. Apart from establishing this new rank of HCP, you want to also provide a progression pathway for care workers to become health workers and for health workers to become HCPs. But having read this report, I have the feeling that this is not really an initiative to attract young people to join this sector. You are only building the ladder for the serving practitioners. If I am a young person, I probably won't start with being a care worker. Right, of course, for young people who are qualified to be admitted in the EN course, of course they would do so. But there are also other students who aspire to joining the sector to become a nurse. They can take this pathway. If they stay here, they can follow this progression pathway. Now, I think the member referred to a comparison, and that should be a comparison between health and care practitioner and enrolled nurses. Basically, as I said, the invasive procedures are involved, urinary catheters, injections, etc. That is why we are establishing this rank of HCP so that we have dedicated practitioners carrying out these 3 tasks. For students who are not directly enrolled in the EN course, they can start with being health workers, and then they can further their studies to become health and care practitioners. In the long term, they are retained in the sector to meet the demand of residential care homes. Mr. Michael Tian. Well, back in 2022, I criticized the sector for not providing a career progression path for the care and health workers. After amending the legislation, the minimum staffing requirements have been put in place, and many homes have told me that they find it very difficult to recruit sufficient enrolled nurses to meet the Tier 4 requirement. So I need to take you to task again. I mean, it's called HCP pitched at the QF level 4, and that's the new proposal. In fact, I received calls thanking me. This is a new proposal. Now, for health workers, the entry requirement is Form 5 education. I am not sure about that, but at least it's either Form 5 or having sit for the DSE examination regardless of the results. Now, the basic requirement is 5 DSE subjects with at least level 2 results. I think that quite a lot of young people in Hong Kong do sit for the DSE exam, but they may not have 5 passes. So their job prospect is really a concern. And I am optimistic about this recommendation because it's one way out for them. It's an incentive. If they haven't done well in school, they still have a way out. Following this path, they could still get a level 4 qualification in the QF. Now, there are concerns. Some training institutions run a 1-year course for enrolled nurses. My question is whether the candidates will be able to fulfill the requirements to become enrolled nurses after taking a 9-month to 1-year study. So I think the government should step in to monitor the curriculum of the courses and the examinations in question. Don't just let the training institutions have their way, because it's just a 1-year course. How do you ensure that this gap can be bridged and that upon completion of the course, these candidates can be qualified enrolled nurses to give people reassurance?
主席，我
I will ask the Deputy Secretary to take the question. Some members said that HCP is equivalent to EN, but there is actually a difference between the 2 positions. HCPs cover care and health duties. Same goes for EN, but actually HCP cannot practice in the medical sector. There is a difference in the training courses between the two posts. HCP will only be trained for the care and health duties to be carried out in care homes. They don't have to learn about, say, gynecological services. But at the end of the training, the HCP must pass the assessment of applying the relevant nursing skills. I will ask the consultant to supplement. Thank you. In terms of the training course, we've set out the framework in the report. We designed it in accordance with QF level 4 requirements. Apart from nursing skills, the HCP trainees will also have to undergo training in communication, management, so on and so forth. As to how we can make sure that the trainees will become qualified, well, we've actually set out some core skills in the training courses, and the trainees must pass the assessment of these core skills before they can graduate or obtain a graduation certificate. And these core skills account for for about 30% of the training. I'm asking if the Social Welfare Department participated in the design of the framework. Or are you just going to pass on the report to the sector? Chairman, let me supplement. I understand the member's concern. The Social Welfare Department review the content of the training courses. We will not just let go upon the commencement of the courses. We will monitor and review the content of the courses, the mode of assessment, the trainees. These are things that we will look into in the future. Are you going to deploy manpower to review or sit in classes? Thank you for your suggestion. We'll consider it. But we will not be approving extra manpower for you to carry out these duties. Next, Mr. Tommy Cheng. Thank you, Chairman. There's merits for speaking at the end of the discussion because most of the questions have been answered. I do not object to the establishment of the new professional rank. Some of my questions have been put by Ms. Doreen Kong. I don't think that the demand is so little, and I don't think that you'll be able to attract young people joining the sector. I will wait and see how many young people will actually join the trade. For the management and operators for care homes, the establishment of a new professional rank may be a good thing, but I'm worried about the effectiveness. And I would also like to know about the salary of the HCP. For dishwashers, they earn some $20,000 per month. How much higher is the salary for HCPs? For restaurants, care homes. When we have so many ranks, a higher salary in the lowest rank would result in a higher salary for the rest of the promotional rank. I have reservations about your approach, and I hope that When you realize that the establishment of the new rank is not as effective, think about other ways for you to attract new blood into the trade. Undersecretary. Thank you, Chairman. Let me elaborate on the 220 figure. When we amended the care homes ordinance, for care homes over 60 people, we have a statutory requirements of having an enrolled nurse. We have taken into account the subvented study places for enrolled nurses to calculate our supply, and we find out that we need an extra 220 enrolled nurses in the future for the care homes to comply with the statutory requirements. With the new rank of HCP, care homes can hire either enrolled nurses or HCP in order to meet the statutory requirements. That's why we say that the potential demand is 220. It's difficult for us to give you an absolute figure on the salary of HCP. Say different restaurants offer different salaries to their managers, but with great demand and small supply, the care homes would offer higher salaries for HCP. As the HCP will allow the care homes to meet the statutory requirements, I'm sure that they will be offered a higher salary because they can carry out duties that are carried out by the enrolled nurse, such as intramuscular injections and other nursing skills. So this is not just about an extra professional rank, but this also allows the care homes to meet the statutory requirements. Now it's my turn. I completely agree with the recommendations and support them. Now the new rank is called Health and Care Practitioner. People may not be as familiar with the wordings. Will you consider creating, say, Tier 1, Tier 2 registered health workers? Because we already have health workers and you try to add an extra rank above it, will you consider renaming the HCP into, say, Level 1 and Level 2 HCPs? For intramuscular injections, insertion, or replacement of indwelling urinary catheters, they can be done by family members after undergoing training, but that's not possible for them to carry out these duties at care homes. For nasogastric tubes, would you reconsider it? Because we've seen trainee doctors having problems inserting gastric tubes. Is there a mechanism for us to make sure that the nasogastric tubes are rightly inserted? Another point, for us to resolve the manpower problem over the long run, can we talk to the Health Bureau to see if we can create a post of enrolled nurses dedicated for social welfare sector, or allow importation of nurses from other places for the care homes? Because members are concerned about the issue about rank. Maybe in the future you can mandate some enrolled nurses to work in the social welfare sector so that they don't see the sector as a stepping stone for them. Maybe we can create courses for enrolled nurses that are dedicated for the sector. That's my suggestion. Chairman, on the importation of labor, after the amending the nurse registration ordinance, we allow for importation of nurses from other places. We're still formulating the details, and the labor importation scheme will be implemented in due course to meet the manpower shortage issue. You can just note my suggestion. I'll ask the consultant to supplement. On the question about the title of the new professional rank, we have considered the suggestion, but I don't think that there is strong ground for it. We have considered the role of the new professional rank before deciding on the title of health and care workers. On the issue about nasogastric tubes, both HCPs and enrolled nurses have to undergo training for the insertion of nasogastric tubes. If trainees cannot pass the relevant assessment, they will not obtain the qualifications. Dr. Teck Chi-Yun would like to speak for the second round. 3 minutes, please. We'll have to extend the meeting by some 15 minutes because we have an extra item. Thank you. I'd like to follow up on my first question. I'd like to seek a direct answer from the administration. Under this new system, how do we attract young people to join the sector? Would the proposed new rank be attractive enough? How do we make sure that the HCP will remain in the social welfare sector and will not go to the medical sector instead? Apart from teaching staff, for health workers, care workers, and therapists, are they included in the review report? Undersecretary, let me address the second question first. As to how we can bar these HCP from leaving the sector, we have no way to guarantee that. But for health and care practitioners, they should stay in the sector because they are trained for it. But for enrolled nurses, they undergo training in different fields. They are trained in gynecology and other fields. It's inevitable that they would go to the medical sector. But for HCPs, they are only trained to carry out the duties in the care homes. I believe that they will stay in the trade. As for the first question on how we can attract young people to join this sector, we need to create a great prospect for them in order for us to encourage them to join the trade. As the position of HCP is pitched at QF level 4, and that's the same as EN. HCP can manage care homes, and I think that there is a big market for it in Hong Kong. because young people will be able to deploy their management skills elsewhere. I'll ask this consultant to supplement.
Thank you, Chair. The report sets out the staffing ratio in different types of homes. They include nurses, health workers, care workers, working in homes. I think members' concern is the progression from care worker to health worker to HCP to a managerial role. And this is the focus of our study. In different institutions, they have different ranks available, and because of the structure, and depending on the internal operations, they may also make adjustments. That's the case for large organizations. Thank you, Chair. All right, on to any other business. Dr. Tik Chi Yun would like to speak on one matter, and that's government public transport fare concession scheme for the elderly and eligible persons with disabilities. He will be allowed to speak, but then the panel will not discuss the issue, and we won't be needing a reply from the administration. I'd like the panel to discuss this concession scheme for the elderly and the persons with disabilities. Many political parties have advocated the retention of this policy. Now, I respect Chairman's arrangement, and that I will air my views on other occasions. Thank you, because this is not in accordance with the agenda today. So if there's nothing else, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.